And I think we are, yep, we're good to go. We are live.
Hamadaki chante washte na pe chiu zapido. Yushki we chankapi. Dakota mi charge ki wakamani de miedo. Nako washichia Dallas Goldtooth makiapido. Indigenous Environmental Network at Tawanido. My name is Dallas Goldtooth. I'm an organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network, and I'm so very happy to welcome you to this webinar. This is a collaboration effort between the Indigenous Environmental Network and Indigenous Climate Action, two national, or in some ways international, Indigenous organizations that are focused on helping support frontline Indigenous communities across Turtle Island in their struggle for environmental justice. This is an effort for us to not only inform our communities about what is happening in response to COVID-19, this pandemic that is currently a global crisis, but also to help bring some comfort, to have some discussion around how are we healing ourselves, how are we actually walking in principle with our original instructions in hand and in heart. And with that in mind, we have some great speakers with us today on this webinar. I know your social media is full of webinars and everyone's trying to podcast nowadays and everyone's doing things. And we're so happy to be part of this discussion. We're so happy to be part of this movement where people are responding to the moment, where they are not, you may not be able to see your loved ones, or you may not be able to see your friends in person, but we're utilizing our digital tools like the internet and webcasting as a way to cross those expanses and be close with one another in this moment. So this is our effort to be a part of that. I want to just kind of open it up and have folks introduce themselves, who are our wonderful, I was gonna say contestants, they're not contestants, they're speakers, and start the conversation going. And so I wanna ask, we'll go from Crystal to Joy to Veronica. So if you want to, each of you just take a moment to introduce yourself. You know, who are you representing? Which communities you may be from, and yeah, just a little bit of information about yourself. So we'll go over to Crystal first.
Thanks, Dallas. I'm Crystal Martin-Lapenskie, and I'm the president for the National Inuit Youth Council. Part of my role as president is to provide Inuit youth voice at the federal table, particularly at the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee. So there I sit as an observer, so I literally just participate when I have the opportunity to speak. I also sit on the ITK Board of Directors and the Inuit Circumpolar Council Canada as a board member as well. In both boards, I am a non-voting member, but what I really am responsible for is ensuring that Inuit youth have the voice at those tables. And thank you so much for having me today. I feel very honored to be able to participate in this great panel discussion.
Awesome. We'll go over to Joy.
Hey, everybody. Wambli wiakawi imatiapi, chante washte nape tiuzapi, ampetu washte yuhapi. My name is Eagle Feather Woman. My English or American name, colonizer name is Joye Braun. I'm a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. I'm Ohenupa, or Two Kettle, and Itazi Pacho, or Nobles. And I work with Indigenous Environmental Network as a community organizer. We were working, a lot of you guys remember Standing Rock. I was up there, work with Keystone XL, fighting Keystone XL, other pipelines and other extractive industries that affect our frontline communities, including LNG projects and whatnot. I'm also a board member of Shield the People, which was one of the first frontline camps against Keystone XL at Rosebud Sioux Tribe. And I'm also a board member of Crushing Colonialism, which is a Native, we try to empower Native journalists, Native storytellers in bringing our stories to the forefront. So very excited to be here today. This should be a really good discussion. So yeah, let's get on. Cool.
Awesome. Veronica?
Bonjour. My name is Veronica Fuentes. My family comes from Yellow Quill First Nation, Treaty 4 territory. I'm a second-gen Salvadoran as well. I'm born, raised, and based out of Treaty 6 in Miskatchewan, otherwise known as Edmonton. I'm a grassroots community organizer with Beaver Hills Warriors, a couple other community networks. We do a lot of solidarity organizing and, as of lately, collecting resources for folks living rough and those with barriers to safe social isolation in the Edmonton area during COVID-19.
Thank you so much to each and every one of you for being on this webinar. We'll get right into it. Both our organizations, the Indigenous Environmental Network and Indigenous Climate Action, have put out statements about COVID-19, and a part of those statements, we really wanted to focus on various, principles that we want to encourage our community to follow as we work through this. And one of those principles is caution. And that was kind of the theme of this call right here, this webinar. This is the first of 4 that we're going to be having over the next number of weeks. And one of the things that we wanted to really put attention to as our communities are rising to the occasion is how do we, who are the folks that we really need to be careful or mindful of? Who are those in our communities who are at greatest risk? And how are we supporting them in this effort? Because, as we have come to know over the past couple months, is that this virus is really unique in that it targets certain demographics within our communities. It's it's mainly those with the immune deficiencies or compromised immune systems who are at great risk. It's those that are older folks over the age of 65 who are at risk. And as time has gone on, there's more information coming in where there's other, it's not just older folks that are getting sick, there's young folks that get sick as well. But this whole stay-at-home movement, this whole call to action for people to socially or physically distance themselves from each other is all about really trying to flatten the curve of basically so that we don't overwhelm our healthcare system with a massive influx of people seeking help. We know that people are going to get sick. We know that people are going to get very sick because of this virus, but we don't want all those folks going into the hospitals at the same time. We want to kind of spread it out so that our doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals have the time to respond to people as it develops. And we're seeing instances of that working and not working across the world. We're seeing where healthcare systems have been overwhelmed. There's a really sincere fear about what are the various scenarios that could be playing out in Indian country, quote unquote Indian country. And so with that in mind, I wanted to just open up the conversation about, we're talking about this virus and people taking action, and a lot of it we're talking about is our elders. Like, we want to do this to protect our elders. But there are also a number of other demographics in our community that are not elders necessarily. So I wanted to make sure that we bring that into this space and talk about that a little bit. So I wanted to start off I'll go over to Joye, and then maybe Veronica, and then Crystal, you can definitely chime in, but I want to start off with Joye, and then Veronica, talk about some of the communities that you may be working with or a part of that are at higher risk than others.
Well, I can definitely talk about being high risk. I mean, me personally, I have diseases that compromise my immune system. So, like you said, people talk about our elders, but there's other people with diabetes, people who have rheumatoid arthritis, people who have lupus, people who have MS, and when you're talking about so-called Indian country, we all know that there's a high rate of diabetes And there's news coming out that if you have diabetes, that this could be really devastating. And so here on Cheyenne River, they've done kind of a proactive approach where they kind of shut down the borders to certain individuals. Volunteer groups can't come in and whatnot. And so you look all around Cheyenne River and there's cases all around us, but not confirmed cases within Cheyenne River. So I think that when we're talking to individuals, you know, we have to expand what we're actually thinking of as far as who is vulnerable. And so yeah, we need to be looking at our diabetic patients. Yeah, we need to be looking at our patients that are getting infusions. We need to look at our people who have cancer, and still have to go out into places like Bismarck or Sioux Falls or Rapid City to get treatment, or you know, other places like that. And then we're putting ourselves at risk, but then we still have to come home, right? So, you know, how do we support those individuals? So like my own family, we have one person that's designated to help 3 different households, right? So we have one person that's designated that masks up, wears the gloves, bleaches off, all that stuff, and make sure that the groceries get done, make sure that the mail gets done, and whatnot. But so how can we do that in a socially responsible way and still make sure that those who are immune compromised are protected, or those that are disabled? Because some people are in wheelchairs and can't get to the store. So some of the stores have like one hour for elderlies, but they don't necessarily let the disabled in because they don't necessarily know that 70% of disabled people is unseen disability, right? So, but we still have a difficult time getting our supplies. So anybody else wants to chime in, that's cool.
Yeah, let's go over to Veronica. I know that you're doing a lot of great work, and your community that you're working with is doing a lot of great work in Edmonton. What's the scenario running up there, and who are some of the folks that are demographics that we really need to be mindful as we are trying to support the response to COVID-19?
So I'm by no means an expert. I'm a community organizer, but I also work with the houseless population through a local agency. And I think what's happening now is reflective of some serious already existing inequality issues. So we know that there is no federal or provincial plan put in place to ensure the wellness of people living rough. But obviously you can't stay home without a home. You can't safely practice social distancing very well without a home. You can't self-isolate without a home. So here in Edmonton, the city has set up somewhat of a field hospital for folk who require to self-isolate, larger drop-in facilities to relieve some of the smaller agencies. But part of the model that local agencies work with here is housing first, which basically argues that housing people is the only way to deal with the other stuff. So there's no way community members can live their best lives, heal, and recover without stable housing. So we see this reflected in how obvious it is that there's no easy way houseless people can get through this virus in a way that ensures their safety, their dignity, and the safety of their friends, and the safety of frontline workers. So I know across the medicine line, there's been studies that tell us people sleeping rough are like double the risk of hospitalization, 3 times more likely to die from COVID compared to others. And that doesn't even include the already existing deficiencies in Black and Indigenous communities that are disproportionately receiving deficient health services and conditions that make them even more likely to be at risk. So a lot of our community members have diabetes, and existing respiratory issues. And I have vulnerable loved ones as well. So like allegedly Indigenous people make up only 6% of my city's population, yet make about 65, I would say, more of our homeless folk. So
Veronica, if I can ask, how do you define, or you've mentioned living rough, but that might be a phrase that other folks may not understand.
Yeah. So the term homeless doesn't necessarily encapsulate all the intersections that might exist in someone not having secure housing. So that could mean someone who's whose name's never been on a lease, or people who are sleeping on the streets. Maybe they're sleeping at a friend's house every couple nights a week. Sleeping rough basically kind of means people that might not have secure housing, basically, yeah. So although a lot of like frontline housing workers are pretty familiar with Indigenous ways of knowing and ceremony and making bannock and stuff, it's like there's still a lot of Indigenous-led solutions missing from the narrative presented and the current resources provided by the city. So for example, like the small West End agency that I worked for recently had to close our doors because there's no way we could contain the space in a way that ensured everybody's safety. So in addition to like capacity being limited, agencies practicing social distancing and operating with uncertainty, things aren't accessible anymore. Arguably, they weren't accessible in the first place. Again, why this is reflective of some issues. But a lot of public facilities are closed as well. So a lot of these facilities people use for showers, public washrooms, personal hygienes, even places you would go to access traditional medicines have shut down. And so basically the essentials are becoming harder to get at. It's cold, fast food restaurants are closing where people might choose to hang out. We know a lot of people don't feel safe going to shelters or other facilities like Two-Spirit folk, people in recovery, maybe people that owe other people money, or maybe their stuff always gets stolen, whatever reason it may be, people losing access to their mail, access to computers, phone access to contact family on the res, or arrange a ride to the res, or housing supports, employment, income, all these things are now harder to get at. And our communities already face racism from the healthcare system, and we're concerned in many ways that our relatives won't even reach out for help when they need it. A lot of our members again have existing health concerns and other needs such as treatment for addictions, physical mobility issues, mental health issues. So I guess moving forward, like there needs to be trauma-informed awareness around Indigenous homelessness, especially because people are scared, lonely, and it's only heightened when you're displaced from your traditional ceremony, your own community. I could go on, but
let me jump in and just say, like, it is pretty obvious to a lot of us who have been doing this work for various social justice fronts that this pandemic has really exposed the fallacies of capitalism, has really exposed the inherent inequities within our society, right? And even our response, right? What is the response that we've been seeing to COVID-19? Like you mentioned, stay at home. And what I'm hearing from you is like some folks, home is a difficult answer, a difficult thing to process, right? Mm-hmm. Even the idea of like, things will be all right if you just stay at home, without being mindful that there's a lot of communities who may not have the ability to, may not have the equity or the money or the resources to stock up, who are required just for survival to constantly go out. And it's not just, I think it's not just a urban issue. There's definitely an issue of rural communities as well. So I'm so happy that we have folks from various backgrounds on this call. And I wanted to go over to Crystal, if it's okay, to maybe talk about a little bit about this, because the communities that you're working and representing are Inuit communities, specifically Inuit youth. You're the president of the National Inuit Youth Council. What are some of the concerns and issues that are affecting Inuit communities in the north as they respond, as the government of Canada responds to COVID-19, but also as the Native communities themselves respond to? What are the challenges in preparing themselves?
Well, I really don't think there's any proper way of preparing for COVID-19. Right now, and for many, many years, Inuit have been dealing with tuberculosis and trying to manage the impacts of TB. Now we're seeing that we're having to basically prepare for COVID-19, and so a lot of the Inuit communities, Inuit Nunanga, which is homelands, have been doing is really restricting travel to essential workers, or for those who are essentially having to go down south for medical or are returning back. but there are strict rules around that as well, where they must self-isolate for 2 weeks in southern Canada. So for example, if somebody is in Cambridge Bay, they're trying to get back home from medical, they would have to self-isolate in Yellowknife or Edmonton for 2 weeks prior to actually getting home. So it would be the same in Edmonton, the same in Ottawa, Montreal. And so there is quite strict rules in place, and for valid reasons. Inuit continue to really struggle with infrastructure. The lack of infrastructure is unbelievable, especially if you're looking at COVID-19, because they're already living in overcrowded homes. So, you know, and it's not overcrowded homes where it's, you know, 10 people of all of the same ages. You're looking at multi-generational households where elders are in the same household as infants. So the vulnerabilities of those individuals is heightened as well.
Thank you very much, Crystal. I think it's critical to learn how that. I think one thing, maybe a lot of us, you may resonate with this, is that this crisis has really showed how, you know, how interconnected everything is, right? How globalization works and how supply chains work, and how you realize, like, oh, you know, even the question of toilet paper, which is like the crazy topic that has dominated this in this crisis for a long time. You know, it's shown how sensitive the system sometimes is to shock, and it really does have an adverse effect upon our communities, Native communities, whether they're in urban community or urban areas or in rural areas. I want to take a moment to pause. I know folks are watching along on Facebook, on watching via Facebook Live. And so I want to say thank you for watching along. You definitely feel free to ask questions. We have 2 folks monitoring the chat there. And so if you have questions for us, feel free to leave them and we'll try to respond to them. I know one question, or actually it was a statement that brought up, and I wanted to see if anybody here, feel free to speak up, is as we talk about vulnerable populations in this in the response to this pandemic, we cannot overlook those that are in situations of sexual violence and domestic violence. They're in these situations where they're dealing with abuse. And I think that gets and that's a personal fear of mine, of thinking about some of the communities that I work with. And so I wanted to see if anyone here would like to speak up about that issue, and how, and maybe also as a follow-up to that, how are you, or how are you seeing communities respond to that? And this is for anybody. Feel free to jump in.
Hey, Dallas. So online, because we're all online, right? Because we're all reaching out, trying to reach one another. One of the things that I've noticed in a couple of the different, groups, online chat groups that I'm in, is that there have been women that have reached out in a couple of those and said, you know, I don't feel safe. And so one of the things that I saw just yesterday was a woman saying, well, contact me and say you're talking about earrings. And they started talking about, you know, say, this is my phone number. You can call me and say you're talking about earrings, and then try to get that person, you know, help. So people have been, you know, it's just like that whole story about, you know, calling 911 but talking about pizza. Instead, we're talking about earrings, we're talking about other things, and people are reaching out through social media. But the reality is that most of those that are in domestic violence situations right now, the uptake of alcohol, the uptake of methamphetamines, the uptake of other drugs is definitely happening in the communities as a response to people's, you know, stressing out and thinking, okay, well, I'm home, I'm just going to party at the house, right? And so then it puts these women and these children that are already in a very dangerous situation in even greater stress and even greater danger, because then they're told, you can't leave the house. you can't leave because you're, you know, of COVID-19. And I was just talking to my cousin, Ash Arpan, and he's a Dewey County sheriff officer, not with the tribe, but with the county. And we were talking about this, and he said that he has seen an uptick of violence against women, and and even against him. He was bit the other day, like literally bit. So it's definitely a scary proposition, and the shelters that are in place right now are definitely getting a lot of calls. And you know, I'm not sure how we can individually respond other than be aware and be willing to make those phone calls if we have to, and try to get that person additional help.
Yeah. Crystal, Veronica, any comment?
Sure. I know that, so for Inuit, there's Goldtooth Inuit Women of Canada, and they represent Inuit women and children. They have been pretty active in terms of their messaging and what they're doing. So I know that there's definitely some things that are in the works right now to support Inuit women and their children, to prevent such cases. I think, you know, we've seen it all in media now, and news reports indicating that there's been an uprise in terms of violence against women and children. I do strongly believe that for Inuit, there's certainly going to be some great representation from Goldtooth. For those who may be in those situations, I highly do recommend that they contact them so that they can get the appropriate resources and support that they need throughout this whole situation. And I think we're all just kind of, we really don't know what to do, right? Like we're people, we're supposed to interact, we're supposed to socialize, and now we're being told that we can't. Now we're being told that we must stay home. And like it's been mentioned, you know, somebody's home may not be safe for them, and they may not want to be there, but they really are being forced because of this whole situation that we're all going through. But I highly do recommend that any Inuit women that are going through this, or even their children, contact Goldtooth Inuit Women of Canada for support.
That's a great recommendation. How do you spell that? Or what's the name of the?
PAUKTITU. Oh my goodness! Hold on a second. I have to write it down.
Okay. PAUKTUUTIT.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Awesome. I think about my own community. So I'm from Lower Sioux Indian community. It's a small little First Nation or small reservation in southern so-called Minnesota. And my sister is actually on council. And when this was all breaking and all the stuff was coming out, like she called me like once or twice a day, and I'm just asking for support, because I know that's a lot of pressure on a lot of leaders, because these questions come up to them. And to be honest, like what you just said, Crystal, is exactly, we're human. Like, we don't necessarily have all the answers. And that's why we really believe in collective action, collective decision making in a lot of our communities. And my sister's on council, and she's like, I don't know what to do, but we're trying our best. And I know one of the things that they came up with on for our community is that we do have a daycare. There is a daycare that is in practice for folks that work for the tribe, as well as that work for the businesses. They could have a daycare. So they decided to leave it open, but offer limited hours just for those vulnerable community or those families that are in situations where they may not feel comfortable. Like, folks may have a hard time with their children, or we know our social workers know certain families have a history of potential abuse in that home, whether it's physical, and there's nothing that they can do at this moment to take the kids out. But what they offered was like, look, if you're having a hard time with your child, if you're just if you're really stressed out and you need a break, we're offering this daycare just for you, just for that limited group of folks with no judgment. They're not going to open any cases on you. We just want to try to be mindful in this emergency situation to try to deal with it in the moment. Now, that may not be the perfect solution, may not be the perfect answer, but it shows you that these people are trying their best to think outside the box. And we want to encourage all of our people to just like really be compassionate about ourselves to one another in this moment, because it is something unique for all of us. No one's really used to it. So I want to say this. I'm going on a rant now. This is me, Dallas, with a rant. Everyone keeps on saying, oh, our people have been through smallpox, or people have gone through all this. You know, this is different, but also let's learn from that. Let's really say, okay, let's not use that as an excuse not to do anything. Let's actually use that excuse to be prepared and take corrective action to make sure that this doesn't spread as bad as those previous epidemics were to our peoples. So I just wanted to share that much, because it always bugs me and annoys me when people say that. Crystal, you would like to speak on what Inuit folks are doing in response to COVID, right, or to this pandemic. What's going on up there?
Well, I think there was a question that was posed around washing hands and the lack of drinking clean water, I should say. So just in regards to that, what Inuit regional land claim agreements or land claim organizations are doing is there's been a pocket of funding that was provided by the federal government. I think it was like over $300 million, and Inuit, a portion of that came to Inuit, and what Inuit organizations have been doing is paying for the water to go into the communities. Now, mind you, I get that's a little bit different than First Nation communities in Southern Canada. Within Inuit communities, they're all, what would you call that? Like your water is delivered to your house. And so there is funding available to Inuit communities in response to that.
Sorry, never mind. I'm on my phone and I'm having troubles. Okay, hi, how's it going? Thank you. Crystal, what I'm hearing, like, so a lot of Inuit communities they're restricting the amount of flights going into some of the communities, right? Or completely cutting them off altogether. What challenges is that presenting to the communities of limited access to resources, being able to fly in, or able to get stuff out? And also, can you speak to the challenge? And this is also maybe even for Joye, the challenge of remote communities. If there happens to be, someone that contracts or someone gets the virus in a community, what is the challenge there in these remote communities? So I'll go to you, Crystal, first, if you want to speak on, like, what is, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, but if one of these remote communities, if the virus ends up in one of those communities, what really could happen? What's so dangerous about that scenario?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I was definitely paying attention. It's just kids being at home, right? It's something we're all adjusting to.
You're all good.
But actually, there has been on the news. It's been confirmed that there are 5 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in one of the Inuit regions, and part of that, challenges much more strict rules that are being placed. Other Inuit regions are looking at, what has happened and trying to prevent it from happening, because if COVID-19 continues to come into Inuit communities, I mean, we've seen what tuberculosis has done. This new virus that's out, we have no cure for it right now. We have no way of actually identifying what the actual symptoms are. If we look at all of the symptoms, it just changes on an almost daily basis. So it's so hard to pinpoint, is it a regular cold, is it a flu, or is it COVID-19? Because it's showing signs of all cold and flus. And if this goes into the communities, I mean, I mentioned earlier about the generational households. If people are not following the protocols that are placed by their territories or their regions, it's going to have huge impacts on the communities, and it really could wipe out a community, if not more. So the travel restrictions are in place for the safety of all community members, all flight crews, and the thing with that as well is we're also challenged with the mental well-being aspect of us as humans, and then us as Indigenous people. We're people, like we're meant to socialize, we're meant to work together, we're meant to be out on the land, and a lot of that, I think there's some misconceptions around what you can and cannot do as well. So I do want to mention that there is, within the Inuit regions, they've been rolling out on the land programs as well, and providing X amount of dollars per household or per family to go out on the land and to live on the land for 14 days. That way you're preventing the spread of COVID-19. And you're also getting that opportunity to be on the land, to hunt, to fish, and to basically, it's like a sense of healing as well. So there's so many different things that are happening right now that Inuit are starting to look at. So we're looking at best practices, we're looking at lessons learned from other communities, and trying to prevent that from happening, and trying to enhance the overall well-being of Inuit in the communities.
Joy, maybe you could speak to that as well, some of the unique challenges for those in the so-called United States, for those rural communities, and maybe even as a follow-up, what has your tribe, the Cheyenne River Sioux Nation, done in response to mitigate the spread of this virus? I know that they recently have closed down businesses. I've heard that they've put on, I don't know if they've put on a curfew, but they have also put up roadblocks, checkpoints onto the res. So maybe you can speak to some of that. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we all know that here in so-called America, that when you're dealing with the Indian Health Service, we don't have the funds to deal just with normal everyday things that we have to deal with, right? We don't have the ventilators available to us. I think we have 2 ventilators, maybe 3 here on Cheyenne River. And we're talking about a population of just Cheyenne River Sioux tribal residents of about 18,000 people here. And that's not including the non-tribal members who do, in an emergency situation, are allowed to use our Indian Health Service emergency. Because, we're not going to turn people away. We do have ambulance. We do have the ability to get people on an airplane or a helicopter. But when you're talking about some of these rural communities, places like Bridger, South Dakota, or Takini, or Blackfeet, you're talking about our emergency crews sometimes taking an hour and a half, sometimes 2 or 3 hours to get out into some of these communities, especially, some of the larger reservations like Pine Ridge or Navajo, or anywhere else like that. It can take a long time to get out there. And because a lot of the roads are really, really bad or have washed away from previous years. So we have to go around places just to get an individual. So they don't have the funds, don't have the resources, roads are bad. It can take a long time to get anybody into the emergency room, and then get them the help that they need. And if you're talking about COVID, they're talking about presenting their coffee, maybe a little bit of mucus is coming up, maybe they have a fever, not necessarily high fever, but maybe they have a fever. They show up, and just in a matter of 2 or 3 hours, their oxygen can be going down to 87, 77, and then you're on a ventilator, right? So we have a lot of those types of issues here in so-called America when you're dealing with reservations. The Cheyenne River Sioux tribe did close down the bars. Now, we're not a dry reservation. We're not like Pine Ridge. So we do have bars. We do have liquor sales here that are run by some of the cities, not here in Eagle Butte. We shut down the liquor store here in Butte. But we did shut down the bars, and we did some of those types of things. The store itself is social distancing, so only 10 people are allowed into the tribal store at a time. They have to be 6 feet apart. They even got cones and everything spaced out. And they're really good about that. Only one person from the household can go in, and only up to $100 can be spent there. So that way people aren't hoarding, but they're encouraging them to get what they need and then go home and then try to shelter in place. We did put up roadblocks just recently on Highway 212, and as of yesterday on 63, and as they get more funds, they'll be putting them up on other entrances here to Cheyenne River. Before that, the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe told all service groups, so all volunteer groups, all church groups, that they should not come, that they should just stay away.
That's a huge issue across a lot of larger Native reservations in the U.S. is that college groups or church groups during spring break would bring kids out to volunteer during that time.
Right, and they would bring them in and then be traveling cross country, and we don't know what they would have been exposed to, either at home or while they're traveling across country and then coming into these small communities. And should an outbreak happen, it's just going to spread like wildfire, because we do live very close together. We do live in multi-generational homes for a lot of people, like our sister said, grandmas to infants, a lot of homes, and that's just how we are, right? That's who we are. I mean, we like to do that, and that's a huge part of our cultures. And so the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe decided that commerce could come through. So those things that are necessary, so like if you're an IHS employee or a doctor or something like that, you can come through. Or if you're bringing in food for the stores or gas, those types of things, those can come onto the reservation. But if you're traveling through, and let's say you're from Minnesota or from Wyoming, nope, you're turned around. Yeah. And so they have been turning around people from Minnesota and from California and from other states and saying, you're not, please don't come through our reservation, because we don't know where they've been. We don't know who they've been exposed to. And so they have to prove that. So when you leave, you have to fill out a form. You have like an actual form you got to fill out, saying where you're going, why you're going, and all of that. And if you are coming back from a hot spot, so say like Bismarck or Sioux Falls, you have to agree that when you come home, that you are going to shelter in place. You're going to self-distance yourself for 14 days. Now, I'm looking at that because in next week, I'm going for an infusion. So up in Bismarck, which is a hot spot. So when I come home, I've got to not go anywhere, and that's not such a big deal because I've been doing that anyway. And hold on.
If it's okay, I want to go over to Veronica. Is that okay, Joy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Veronica, I would like to see, and this is maybe for the conversation, but what are some of the solutions? I know that we're talking about a lot of the issues and the problems as we respond to it. What are you seeing as far as on the community level? You're a community organizer. How are folks responding to this and helping one another when you may not be able to depend on the province or may not be able to depend on the government to provide services and support? How are communities stepping up to the plate and helping themselves? And in particular in the work that you're doing up there in so-called Edmonton?
Yeah, so I think we realized pretty quick that we can't count on our municipality, our provincial government, or federal government to do the groundwork. So for example, like working from a harm reduction framework, A lot of our community members are struggling with addictions, etc. So it's, on one end, it's about making sure people have the things they need so they aren't put in positions to be unsafe. This this means providing booze and cigarettes to people so they aren't experiencing withdrawals when and if they get sick in these isolated shelters, and assuring people retain that agency over their issues in this crisis. So, like, again, obviously social distancing isn't easy when you're living rough and you're unable to hoard your supplies, and having to visit the clinic every day to get medicine and being dependent on uncertain drug supply. So, for example, really rad, in Vancouver, they've approved safe supply of drugs, because we know COVID is not the only public health crisis that homeless folk are vulnerable to. That's one example. But in our community here, there are some settlers, for example, who set up outreach group of sorts after hours. So a lot of shelters aren't going to be open during the night, or for whatever reason people don't want to leave their camps. So they were resourcing supplies to hand out to people who are sleeping rough. As shelters hit capacity, some people don't want to go anymore. Many reasons I've already shared, but so as they're handing out food, personal hygiene, etc., we started to kind of realize there was ceremony was missing from all of this. So food security is a real issue, but that can't be it. So we wanted to facilitate that as best as we could. So, for example, this meant for us, we packed up sage, cedar, sweetgrass in little baggies to hand out to community members who don't have access to these things. So again, like, bringing ceremony to people living rough is just as important to our dignity in the spirit in these really isolating times, because now is the most important time to be laying your tobacco down and smudging. So I think moving forward, we're starting to realize that there is a need for that in the first place, but also now more than ever, because again, these are survivors, like 60 Scoop young folk who are exiting the child welfare system, all people who are profoundly affected by colonial violence and resource extraction in ways some of us still do not really understand. But ultimately, we can't boil our relatives down to like charity cases, right? Like, these are the kind of kinship relations that have always been about solidarity. These are these are culture carriers, like I said, survivors, language speakers, elders, our seventh generation. We have prophecies and teachings that grant us responsibilities to these relations, our ancestors, and the life-sustaining nature of our worldview. And again, I always argue that, like, urban Indigenous peoples have a very special kind of treaty relationship, like the urban center never stopped being Indian land. This is all Indian land. So I guess action items include like donating to frontline organizers, agencies that are maybe less funded than like the city projects, and donating medicines, because a lot of these frontline outreach groups don't have access to medicines because a lot of them are settler run. And so doing the work to facilitate that, or even organize a medicine drive, organize a sock drive, push for a safe drug supply in your city, donate to the food bank, support Indian mutual aid, organize your own Indigenous-led mutual aid. I guess those are some examples of like tangible things you could do. Hope that was helpful.
That's very helpful. I have a follow-up question, and the other folks, you could definitely, Crystal and Joy, you can chime in. What do you hope, like, as people are rising to the occasion, right, and they're coming up with different ways to help their community? I guess that I can't help but have this question of like, what do we know that the road ahead is going to be very hard. That because of the way the world economy is going, the way things are happening right now, that we still have a lot of hardship and troubles ahead of us. But we can't not allow ourselves to look past that, right? What does the future look like? And so I want to ask each of you, like, what do you hope to see on the other end of all this? Like, what is something that you hope to see that we learn as communities, or maybe even the relationship between Native peoples in the settler states, the federal governments that they work with? Like, what is the hope that you see, hopefully, that we can obtain coming out of this crisis? I'll go over to you, Veronica, first, and we can, Crystal and Joy, you can chime in.
Yeah. Again, like I said before, this is reflective of some already existing issues, but like, I like to hope, I mean, like, we know we're not going to come out of this the same. It's like there's no ethical way to come out of this the same. So I'm hoping I guess I can only hope this experience is reflective of, again, of some deficiencies in the ways we understand the needs of Indigenous people sleeping rough, and moving forward, creating a fundamental norm of dignity, agency, and readiness that centers Indigenous-led solutions to the fundamental issues that have left our people unwell, unhoused, unsafe during this pandemic, but also unwell, unhoused, unsafe every other time of the year. Because a lot of the barriers people are experiencing right now aren't new to houseless folk, aren't new to people sleeping rough. So I think maybe everyone else is getting a taste of what isolation feels like in a way, and ideally it makes people more human. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we get greedier. I don't know. Maybe we get scared. Maybe we plant more city gardens. I don't know. But I know that, like, our traditional ways can be used as a solution to a lot of the problems we're facing now. So maybe we're waking up a little bit, is what I would hope.
Thank you. Crystal?
I think Veronica said it pretty good. Resilient. Oh, hello?
Yeah, there you go. You're good.
Okay, perfect. We're resilient people, and we say that over and over again, but I don't think we have actually realized it before. And once we get through this, I think a lot of people are going to come out feeling like, wow, like I survived it, and really get that feeling of resiliency. And what I really hope to see are more Inuit youth that are, developing their traditional skills. Maybe it's sewing, maybe it's throat singing, maybe it's drum dancing, maybe it's learning different traditional songs. And this is, I think, the perfect time to really capture that and to really gain that asset that we all have hoped for, or we all want to develop, but we've always made excuses to defer it to another time. And I think this would be the perfect time to be able to carry on the traditions, phoning our elders, or doing a window visit, and just trying to continue on that learning. And I really hope that's something that we're able to all do.
Joy?
Oh, what do I hope for? First, this whole thing, when we're talking, the whole thing that we're talking about today is really learning how to be a good relative. And how do we be a good relative in today's world when we're facing such extreme danger? And it is extreme danger. There's this huge unknown everywhere we turn, but we can't live in that. We can't live in that, and our relatives didn't live in that. My grandma Ione used to say, "It is what it is," and today it is what it is, and we have to keep moving forward. So my hope is that as we're moving forward in our communities, and as we're learning and relearning some of these skills, and really practicing our tribal sovereignty, such as these checkpoints, and really, because one of the things that we learned is that we at one point in time we lived in this really amazing circle, and now we've taken that out. Since 2016, 2017, we've taken that out into the community, and all these different things are growing out of that. And we have to learn how to be a good relative. We've gone into this modern world, and we've taken on all these colonizer attributes, and it's time to start shedding those. it's time to start saying, who am I as Lakota? Who am I as Navajo, as Dene? Who am I as Lummi? Who am I as Puyallup? And how do I reach out to my relatives? Yeah, we have to use some of the modern technology, but we don't have to necessarily take on those attributes. We can start shedding those attributes. So my hope is that we learn how to be good relatives, and just keep moving forward. That's my hope.
Yeah, I think, and I should have maybe expanded on it. And you all did like. Well, I guess what I could have added on to is the reason I ask it, and you all answered it perfectly in your own way, is by visioning what we see on the other end of this helps us respond to the moment now, right? If we really are looking to maintain our relationships as good relatives, then there's work that needs to be done in each and one of you, each and every one of you are doing that. And if the hope is for us to come out of this with stronger, more sustainable, sovereign nations, then we're seeing that happening right now. So it's like I bring it up because I think it's oftentimes like I got pessimistic cousins. Everyone's got those cousins say, "Why you're a dreamer, or why do you do that work? What's the point of it?" kind of thing. And that's what cousins are for sometimes. But it's like, look, if you can't envision the future, then how are you going to change the moment now, right? How are you actually going to build towards something better and stronger? And from the sounds of it, I think each and every one of you and the crews that you work with, the folks that you're a part of, those communities are rising to that and trying to change things. And it sounds it's amazing. How can folks, I guess, what words of encouragement may you have for other folks across, whether in Canada or the United States, in any country, who are worried or want to help their community? And I know we're all just individuals doing our own thing here, but I want to see open this opportunity of like, what words of encouragement would you have to offer to folks who are trying to help, who aren't just worried about just their families and stuff, families and immediate surroundings, but also trying to talk about community? And what are the ways that have you seen people use the internet as a way to kind of help out? This is just a random question that came off the top of my head. So whoever wants to take that, feel free to chime in. Or I will call somebody out.
What I've been seeing a lot, I mean, social media is I think one of the greatest tools that have ever been invented, because that's how a lot of Inuit are staying in touch, is by social media. And what I have really seen is, I've seen it before, but I'm seeing it now more, is the sharing of country food. The sharing of, using other people's skidoo or kamutik to go out on the land. There's that communal respect and appreciation that I've really started to see. And I think, when you show kindness, that kindness affects another person, and then that affects another person, and it's this chain reaction. I would say to keep doing that and be respectful of the protocols that are in place by your regional public health. Of course, we need to ensure the safety of our well-being ourselves, so that we can continue to serve and protect other people. But we need to do it in a safe manner, and that's by following the protocols. But also continue just being kind and, just try and keep your daily routines as normal as possible, and continue using social media, because it's working. Social media is really helping people get out of the rut. It's keeping people connected. And there's different ways of visiting. Like I mentioned, you can do a window visit. But definitely really important to continue on that kindness.
Joye, I've noticed that with that in mind, like social media has become an immense tool, and I see a lot of folks. Honestly, I feel like that, like people are become more and more aware about immune deficiencies and those that have compromised immunities, and folks who are or folks with disability. Um, and it's a good thing. I think people are more aware of their privilege, those that may not have disabilities. Um, uh, so I want to maybe, what are words of inspiration, or what can you speak of this moment as we gain more awareness about folks with disabilities, people that would have compromised immune systems, and what words of encouragement do you have for those folks out there who are really worried or concerned right now?
Don't listen to Texas deputy governor. He was the one that was trying to say kill all the elderlies, right? That Texas vice governor or whatever. So don't listen to him. And don't listen. There's also a movement, just as people are becoming more aware of some of these disabilities, there's also a movement, a counter movement, and unfortunately they seem to follow the orange head guy, saying that we need, that those that are disabled are elders or some kind, that they should be sacrificed. So don't listen to that, because everybody, and I mean this, every single person can do something. And I never, heck, I was stopping trucks in a wheelchair, mega loads. Anybody can do these things. Anybody can step up and make a difference in your community. You can call up your tribe and say, where can I volunteer? Like right now, people are needed in the command center. You can be in a wheelchair or a walker or whatever, and you can go volunteer at the command center. There's a ton of plethora of things that you can do as long as you're following, like what we said, safe best practices. The internet is an amazing thing. The social media is an amazing thing. At the same time, remember to filter everything through that comes through, because not everything is going to be 100% accurate. Use, follow along and really listen. Follow your heart, educate yourself. But everybody can do things. It's just you just have to be creative. And I encourage people to use their creativity.
Veronica, I know there's a unique challenge for community organizers, right? This moment, like, because community organizing is about, in my opinion, it's like you're on the ground, you're out there in the community, you're working with folks face to face. So I have a lot of friends who are like, how do you work in this moment? Like, how can you support your community if you're not able to be face to face with your community? And some folks are, because they're trying to help in the moment. So I don't know if you have any thoughts to share on that, and as we move forward, like, what words of advice do you have folks that are doing that work and who want to do community organizing work?
I guess as all this is happening, I think there's been a little bit of a shift of attention from existing issues, like, for example, like coastal gaslighting out in Wet'suwet'en territory, still, like, they're increasing production because of all this, and there's still people out there that are like, no, don't forget about this, listen to us. So I guess making sure you're still wrapped up in all that regular old fight the resource extraction industry stuff, I guess, is like one of the coping mechanisms, maybe, I don't know. But also maybe like practicing our traditional trade economies. Like the other day I gave someone some jam to go pick me up some bubble tea. Like those are contemporary ways of practicing our traditional trade economies, which again, back to what Crystal was saying, we're seeing an increase in that type of mutual aid. Again, that's not new to us, right? Those are, look, we've always known how to do that. We continue to know how to do that. And I guess doing that through social media, again, like we arranged a medicine drive all through my phone. I'm sitting there, I was getting bored for a while. I was like, hey, let's do this. And I just on my phone, within like 40 minutes, we had dozens of cigarettes sent over. So I guess, yeah, I like there's a lot you can do on in your own self-isolation. I think everyone's kind of covered everything. I also saw this really cool thing from my friend Nigel sent it to all of us. Indigenous Action released this zine of how to make like emergency hand wash stations. I'll post it in the event page. That's a really cool idea. Something you can give to the community that is going to stay in the community. Yeah, so I guess if you're hoarding supplies, figure out how to get it out there. I guess I think I've mentioned some things earlier, but that might be all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. One thing I would add is, even though we're on social media right now, people are watching on Facebook Live and they're watching on their phone or their computer. It also might be good just to turn off the screen and just accept the moment for what it is and disconnect. I actually, me and my wife, we had to go through that, where we found ourselves watching the news every chance we could get. And it was like those every day for 3 hours, there's a new press conference. And at a certain point, I was like, we already know how bad it is. We already know what's going to happen. So let's just not watch that. Let's just turn it off and just try to create some normalcy in the quietness in our home. And it really helps. So that's one thing, is I think a lot of us respond to the crisis by really zoning out and going, just washing through social media. But also, it might be a good moment for us to step back from that, right? And yeah, so that's my little 2 cents on it. We're at it's been an hour. I want to make sure everyone has, if there's questions that people have, if you're watching right now, here's your last chance here to present some questions for our panelists. And I really am so thankful that we've had this opportunity for all of us to get here to be on this conversation together. I think that in general, the fights that our communities have always been a part of are not going away. And maybe this crisis is merely just showing us why those fights are that much more important, why they are vital, whether it's the fight for clean water, whether it's a fight against extractive industry, whether it's a fight for adequate jobs or adequate housing, adequate health care. Like, those are all very important. And I think this pandemic has definitely exposed those insecurities within the system. And I think that this is a moment for us to not only connect with ourselves and our community in which we live, but just like this, it's giving us a chance to connect internationally, connect via the internet with Native communities who are going through the same fight, same struggle. So this is very much about Indigenous solidarity in the work that we're doing right now. So I just want to see if y'all have any parting words as we close down in this space. Any parting things about, maybe how about provide information about, one, there was a lingering question of folks that, are there resources that you would suggest if folks are dealing, suicide hotlines, folks that might be in domestic violence or sexual violence situations, or folks who just want to talk to anybody. I want to provide this chance for if any of you of the panelists have any suggested numbers, knowing that they may not be your organization that's doing that, but these are just recommendations that you know of. Want to provide that at this time. And then, as well as, how can people follow the work that you're doing or support the work or organization that you're with? So let's go over to Crystal.
Sure. I think when it comes to resources, I mentioned earlier, there's Goldtooth Inuit Women of Canada. Again, their role is to represent Inuit women and their children, and they do focus a lot on prevention and intervention of women and child abuse in all forms. But there's also ITK, which is Inuit Tapere Canada Me, which is the National Inuit Youth, National Inuit organization. So they're the representing body for Inuit in Canada. Highly suggest that if you are going to be on social media, that you follow them on Facebook or Twitter or on Instagram. They do regularly post information about various what am I looking for here? Posts about organizations and what they're doing. So regional organizations often make public announcements, and so they'll post those or share those on their pages. In terms of Inuit that are in southern Canada, which are a lot as well, there are Inuit organizations in Edmonton, in Winnipeg, in Ottawa, and there's friendship centers as well that work closely with Inuit communities in southern Canada. Highly suggest reaching out to them as well. But I think what you said as well, Dallas, in terms of turning off social media, I think that's important as well. And getting out and getting some fresh air, I think, is also really important. But in terms of all of that, it's follow them on Facebook. They're all I think a majority of them are already working from home, so they're not in their offices. So the best way to communicate would be by email. But in terms of support for any one going through challenges from all of the anxiety and the stress that's happening to everybody's world, it's not it's almost like the new normal, which is really bad. But there is help out there as well. There's Hope for Wellness lines that offer Inuktitut, Cree, and Ojibwe, as well as English and French in Canada. So those would be alternative phone number, or there'd be an alternative resource for you to contact who might be able to better provide resources as well.
Thank you. Joy?
Yeah, so first off, I just want to remind everybody that, because you had brought it up about KXL, and then also with Coastal GasLink with our sister said with Wet'suwet'en, is these extractive industry companies, and I also heard one about coal in West Virginia, are using the COVID crisis to go in and start construction and then bring in a lot of men. So it's highlighting a lot of issues, especially here in rural South Dakota or rural Montana or rural Nebraska. But talking about some of the different resources, I know there was a question about domestic violence. Here on Cheyenne River, people can call the Sacred Heart Family Services Shelter. It's 605-964-7233. Their crisis number is 1-800-390-9298. And you can look that up online with Sacred Heart Center. They provide a lot of services. They provide family services, the women's shelter, domestic violence help, and whatnot. They certainly helped me, almost 25 years ago. So really, really good resource there. But you can definitely look at Indigenous Environmental Network's page, ienearth.org. And we have all of our emails on there. You can contact any one of the organizers, anybody there, and we'll try to do our best to get information for you or make some kind of connection so that you can get assistance in what you're asking for. And that's across the board. That's with that's with food sovereignty. That's with saving the forests, non-GMO trees, the extractive industries. There's a whole host of things that IEN works with. But again, and we have a program where we're raising funds to get small grants to frontline communities too. So you can look on ienearth.org to find information on that.
Thank you. Veronica?
I'm running out of things to say. Everyone's said so much.
Well, what can folks do to help out and help whatever, are there places where people can donate to help those that might be living rough in the Edmonton area, or how can they help support that work?
Well, so we're starting to city-run facilities and agencies, there needs to be more outside of that, is what we're kind of picking up. So we're kind of rolling with some, I guess, again, like I mentioned, like after-hour type outreach programs. We don't have anywhere to donate. I was talking to someone today. I'll set that up. We'll make sure that that gets out. But again, that's just going to be for my community, right? And that's not going to be the same in every other community. So ideally, your money should be going towards the grassroots work in your own community. I wish, I don't know. I don't know what else.
But I think that it's a great point. I think that we have to be mindful of where are we investing our resources and time and energy. And the idea of investing in your own community first is always, I think, really important, especially in this world of globalization where we realize what happens when the world invests their time or their money elsewhere and something comes crashing down and everyone's left exposed, right? So I think that each and every one of you have provided some great resources and great understandings about what's happening right now in this moment, and also some great visions for how we come out of it. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for sharing those visions with us, for sharing this time with us. And, just being here in this moment has been very beautiful. And I want to encourage each and every one of us to support the folks on screen here. You can go on the Facebook event page, is the information, their names, where you can follow up on some of the work that they're doing, and continue to follow and support Indigenous Climate Action and the Indigenous Environmental Network. We're working together, two organizations, sister organizations right now, working together. This is webinar 1 in a 4-part series where we're going to be talking with folks on a variety of different themes and topics, where I'm not going to be the moderator in all of them. I think I'm only moderating this one, so we're going to have some even better moderators than me, and I really look forward to that as we move forward. And I do want to mention that the Indigenous Environmental Network, Joye has mentioned it, is putting together a mutual aid fund to help support Indigenous relatives across Turtle Island, not just North America, but as well as South America. And so we are currently working on publicly releasing that information and how folks can apply, and that should come out within this week or so. So those communities or individuals who are working within the community who may need some support, there's small grants. There's an opportunity to apply through the Indigenous Environmental Network for our Indigenous Mutual Aid Fund. So definitely follow along on our social media for that information and see if you can apply. And if you're one of the lucky few that have extra resources who would like to donate for this cause, go to ienearth.org, where you can help us out, work with our folks, help our peoples out, and do a good thing. So thank you very much. Everyone can wave, I guess. Veronica, Crystal, Joye, thank you for your time. Thank you for following along. And I hope everyone's safe. I hope everyone's taking care of each other. And let's be good relatives as